I've seen a lot of people lately asking about DevSecOps. What does DevSecOps stand for, and what does it actually mean? Is it still relevant? And perhaps more importantly, will it help you deal with the AI-generated code keeping you awake at night? So I think you're asking the right questions, and I'm going to try to answer those in this video. So I've been building and leading product security programs for over 24 years now. And if there's one thing I've learned in all that time, it's when a massive technology shift happens, like the one we're experiencing right now with AI-driven development, you either adapt or you fall further and further behind. The problems you're seeing, unfortunately, won't fix themselves, especially if you keep doing the same things over and over again. So here's where we're going to go in this video. First, I'm going to share how we got to where we are today so it all makes sense. Second, I'll share what DevOps is and lay out the principles that drive the practice. And then third, I'll give you a simple, easy to understand description of DevSecOps and how it integrates within DevOps itself. Finally, I'm going to share why it matters more today in 2025 and what to prioritize next in your journey. So let's go ahead and get into it. But before we jump in, let me share something really quick. I've spent a lot of time developing hands-on labs and walkthroughs and templates for DevSecOps. And you can find those inside my DevSecOps Pro community. There's going to be a link in the video description and on screen. Okay, so let's dive into a quick history of how we got here. Years ago, we all developed code using the waterfall methodology. Basically, this is how it worked. Someone would come up with a project idea, and then they'd spend months gathering requirements and building a plan. It was a heavy planning process. It could easily take 6 months before you wrote the first line of code. Process was also very linear. You did planning, and then you got funding, and then you built the team, and then you did the development work. And when development work was finished, you'd start doing testing. Functional testing, user acceptance testing, load testing, and yes, security testing. But the problem was, when testing actually found a big issue, the launch had to slip. And those slips are usually way late in the process, right at the end. So it was great for budgeting because you could allocate budgets and headcount. Finance teams loved it for that, but it was not great for customers, and it was frustrating for developers. But here's another problem. Oftentimes the code that was shipped totally failed to meet the customer's needs, and we didn't find out until we had invested thousands of hours of work. So that's not a good thing, obviously. So next comes Agile. Agile brought sprints and MVPs, or minimum viable products. Instead of creating a huge project plan at the beginning, collecting requirements and all of those things, Agile teams would build the smallest application that could be used by customers. And then they'd ask for feedback from actual customers to make sure that they were getting it right. Work typically happens in sprints, which usually last 2 to 3 weeks. And the way it works is teams spend a few hours up front planning their sprints. Each development item or task is called a user story, and it's typically stored on a backlog until it's pulled into a sprint plan. But testing was still siloed. If you were testing security and happened to find a vulnerability in another section of code, in a section that wasn't in scope for the current sprint plan, it'd get deferred and it would get placed on the backlog. Developers would often say, sure, yeah, I'll take a look at that. We're going to put it on the backlog. But in case you don't know, when a developer says they'll put it on the backlog, it's a polite way of telling you to go pound sand. There's a good chance that request is never actually going to get prioritized unless you follow up relentlessly. So Agile allowed dev to ship faster with frequent feedback from real customers. What was delivered was usable, but there was a problem. Those frequent changes often broke things. You remember the famous Mark Zuckerberg quote, move fast and break things? Unfortunately, that meant that the operations teams were suddenly getting more pages in the middle of the night. And you can imagine the frustration. So DevOps came about to break down those silos. You build it, you run it. If something goes bump in the night in your code, you get paged. And that shared responsibility improved both reliability and speed. There was shared pain when something broke. But it had some elements that resisted security, or at least the way we did security historically. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's dive a little bit deeper into DevOps. So DevOps isn't a tool set or even a methodology per se. It's a culture and a system for safer, faster development flow. So there's actually 5 guiding principles that are known as CALMS principles, C-A-L-M-S. We're going to go through those right now. The first one is culture, development and operations teams acting together as one delivery team. And this was a big change from the previous approach where development teams threw code over the wall and operations teams had to deal with the fallout. The next one is automation. Automated pipelines create consistent results and allow teams to move fast. And it's also the way we move from one deployment every 2 to 3 weeks to several deployments per day. We automate the deployment and the testing needed to do it safely. The next one is lean, and being lean is all about removing low-value activities and iterating quickly. We emphasize being nimble and scrappy and failing fast. And failing fast means running small experiments early and changing course if it fails. The next one is measurement. It's important that we track the metrics that matter most, like lead time, failure rate, or mean time to recover. And then finally, sharing. Share knowledge and ownership across teams. And yes, that means developers often carry pagers. So those are the principles security teams need to use or work within rather than trying to work around. And oftentimes when security teams fail, it's because they don't understand those principles and how developers work. They want development teams to conform to the security team's way of doing things, and often those methods resemble the old waterfall methodology. And when we slip into that mode, we slow teams down and get ignored. So let's talk about how we do that, because this is what DevSecOps is all about. Okay, so in plain English, DevSecOps means everyone owns security, and the checks are automated across the delivery pipeline. So let's look at how security is woven into the column's principles. First, culture. We need to end the blame loop. Security often blames development for vulnerabilities. Development teams often blame security for slowing things down. But here's the thing. In 24 years, I've never met a developer who wanted to write vulnerable code, and I've never met a security engineer who wanted to slow things down. We got to work as a team. Next one, automation. Manual scans and testing still have a place, but they don't scale. They don't scale today. They didn't scale then. We need to add automated security checkpoints for things like code scanning, checking for secrets, and testing infrastructure. Lean. We need to prefer fast, high-signal scans over slow, noisy, comprehensive ones. But you don't want to increase the time it takes to run those pipelines by several hours. That just kind of reinforces the feeling that development has that security slows things down. And you definitely don't want to overwhelm developers with hundreds or thousands of unvalidated findings. You start with a fast, high-confidence scan. When it finds something, everyone is confident that the issue is real and it's a big deal. Next is measurement. We define the outcomes first, the metrics that actually matter. Things like vulnerability mean time to resolve, percent of pull requests scanned, security vulnerabilities that slip through, etc. And then lastly, sharing. We publish secure patterns and abuse cases so development can self-serve. Now this one can be tough for security people. We often think of the intelligence we have to be super confidential. But how are development teams going to know what attacks their applications are facing if you don't tell them about it? Now, if we do all of those things correctly and consistently, security can actually become part of the delivery, not an afterthought or something we try to slap on at the end. So AI coding tools are shipping more code faster and with more vulnerabilities. And oftentimes developers don't fully understand the code they ship. Vibe coding, looking at you. If you rely on manual reviews and human-only processes, you're going to continue to fall further behind. Really, the only way to keep up is to build automation in the tools and processes development is already using. Inside the repository, the pull request, the pipeline, so those checks run at the right time every time without you babysitting it. Now, I personally believe the importance of DevSecOps is only going to increase with time. I don't believe it holds all the answers, but it's the place to start. There are already good practices you can begin using, and they work. So just to recap, DevSecOps means shared responsibility plus automated guardrails. And it extends DevOps principles so security rides along on the same rails as delivery. But remember, you shouldn't try to boil the ocean. Your goal is to work the way developers work. So here's my recommended next step. Git's fundamental to everything that developers do. So if Git and Git branching feel a little fuzzy, I'd start there. And I can help with that. I'm already working on a video to help security engineers understand and use Git. So, subscribe if you want to get notified when it lands. And finally, if you like this, I think you'd like the content in my DevSecOps Pro course and community. So whenever you're ready, come join us. You'll get the training, the hands-on labs, templates, and live support, and you can find it over at DevSecOpsPro.com. Hope to see you there someday.